All right. Hello, everyone. I'm James Kelly with OETC, and welcome to There's Some Good in This World, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth implementing security for, presented by Stephen Russell and Justin Vennard, Systems Administrators at Beaverton School District. They're going to be handling Q&A throughout, so feel free to put your questions in chat or into the Q&A feature on the right side, but if there's anything that they don't get to, we can talk about it at the end of the session if we have a little bit of time. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen and Justin.
Welcome. All right, so I don't know how many are Lord of the Rings fans, but I just couldn't resist using a Boromir quote for this. So bear with the whole theme that we got going on here. But yeah, I've been working for the Beaverton School District for, I don't know, six years ish, and been really impressed here on, how we all are working hard to move towards security and just how fluid we could be here in IT. And I'll let Justin introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Justin Vennard. I am a system admin for Beaverton School District. At Beaverton, I focus on pretty much anything Microsoft related. So Azure, O365, SCCM, Windows, whatever, all that fun stuff. All my IT experience comes actually from working in the school district. Prior to working for Beaverton, I worked for Mesa Public Schools in Mesa, Arizona for 7 years. So I have about 10 years of experience in IT around the education realm itself. So like Stephen kind of mentioned, today we're just going to talk about like the journey that we've been on as sysadmins, trying to balance this idea of security versus convenience, and how we can kind of focus on that from like an endpoint level and an interaction with our users at schools or at your central office or kind of anything along those lines. Yeah.
So during the presentation, we'll switch off. I'm mostly Apple focused, and Justin's mostly Windows, but a lot of our security tools overlap, and we work pretty close together on doing all this. So I'll go ahead and get this started.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing, if you have an opportunity, please fill out the polls. When we put this presentation together, we were kind of hoping for a more like open forum conversation. That way we can all learn from one another, because we all know that, we're all facing the same problem. So you may be ahead of us in this journey or vice versa. So please use the chat and any polls there that we have up, so we can kind of get a better understanding of where everybody is in their environment around some of these topics.
All right. So in our previous thinking, it was always what's best for the user, and like Justin said, my whole career has been in education, and focusing on taking all the friction away when it comes to computers for teachers is what IT's main goal has always been. How can I automate something to make their lives easier so they don't have to, put in a help desk ticket or anything? We wanted IT to be totally transparent, and we really didn't even want to know we didn't want them to know that we even existed. That's how transparent we wanted technology to work. So that's what our thinking has always been, is what's best for the user and not necessarily best for the organization. Customer service is still our number one priority. It's still something that we focus on the most. But what we want to push towards more is still having customer service, but trying to put a security in the forefront of their minds and really educating them and helping them slowly change their habits so they're more security focused themselves. In the past, devices have always kind of been probably viewed as kind of like their own personal device, even though it's owned by the school district. This is probably same for any organization or any company. People kind of use it as their daily driver. They're doing work, they might as well pop a tab open and order some new shoes on Amazon or whatever, and then go back to what they were doing. So their personal life and their work life are kind of integrated on the device. Helping them be better, more security conscious while they're using the device is going to help them in their personal life and hopefully also in their work life. So we're going to probably start here at Beaverton taking a step back from convenience and educating our users and making security more of our focus. It's not going to be easy. It kind of goes against what we've always had our core directive being, is making it so easy for them to use everything, but that's simply not possible. It's hard to have, if you have a scale like security and convenience, like you can't have one. They kind of have to be one or the other. So we're trying to tip the scale the other way as much as we can.
Yeah, and to reiterate a little bit on what Stephen just said too, is, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but we like this idea of like empowering the user, and what Stephen mentioned there of teaching the user, right? Like we have staff, and we've always tried to make it seem like we're not there. We're solving problems, we're doing things without them realizing it. But we also want them to understand why we're doing these things. And maybe if they're learning while we're doing these things, they can implement it at home with their own life, like protecting themselves outside of just when they're in, that confined school district idea or that work mode. So we're trying to find that balance there.
So we kind of put together this timeline of kind of what we've been dealing with. And I've chatted with a few other school districts, and I feel like they're in pretty similar boats. It was kind of like life before COVID and life after COVID for the most part. But even before the pandemic, we were actively trying to get MFA enabled. We had some security scares. Our previous security admin, Nathan, was able to catch one where there was a pretty advanced phishing scheme going on, and he had to work with the FBI to get it resolved. And, MFA became a very strong focus for us. So we were already in the process of trying to figure out the best way to get that implemented, but there were a lot of hurdles in our way. At the same time, we had a system in Beaverton where teachers were able to go to a website and read a disclaimer and agree to using admin rights and understanding that there were conditions tied to that. For example, like if their system was misbehaving and they were an admin on their system, if we couldn't figure out what was going on in a timely manner, we were going to wipe their system, and those kind of conditions that were linked to admin rights. And once they agreed to that, we let them be admins. So only about 10 to 15% of our staff were admins before this, and the rest were just standard users and happy with our self-service offerings. We were trying to get that down to zero. We didn't want any kind of attack surface available for our end users having full admin rights and inadvertently installing malicious software. We were in the process of rolling out Microsoft Defender ATP, the EDR solution that works on both Mac and Windows, and it's fully a full security suite where it scans the system and then reports to a portal where we're able to get a more in-depth view of the system. That's almost completely rolled out in our fleet before the pandemic. So luckily, when devices went home, that was already installed. So we had some sort of view into what was happening on our endpoints. At the same time, before the pandemic, we were shifting to a 15-character passphrase policy. We were moving away from short, complicated passwords that humans can't remember to longer, easier to remember passwords that were hard for computers to crack. So there's an XKCD comic about that. I'm sure most of you guys have seen it, but I always think about that. Anyway, so where we are now, with COVID, everything got put on pause. Yeah, correct horse battery staple. Thank you, Ian. Everything got put on pause, and work from home and CDL became the most important part of what we were doing. We had kind of scramble mode and put VPN on a bunch of our staff devices with limited access control so they can get to the services they were needing to get to from home. At the same time, we have a 1-year Wi-Fi certificate that gets issued by our Active Directory certificate server. It deploys the certificate along with the wireless payload, and those only have a year expiration. So a lot of our devices were at home and probably had expired certificates. We had to pivot and figure out a way to be able to renew those certificates while devices were at home and not rely on VPN. So, we set up a SCEP service with Jamf and Intune in order to renew those certificates remotely. And we had really great success for that before teachers started trickling back in, a few months ago. So now, shifting from convenience over security, we want convenience with security moving forward. We want in the future to hopefully be MFA fully implemented, use Lightspeed as our internet filter for staff and students. Right now, it's only students. We're looking into and trying to implement conditional access on the Mac side, having a way of making sure that the computer's in a known good state before it's able to access resources, and really training our staff to be more security conscious and no more admin rights. So those are our goals. That's our plan to get to that point in the future. Do you have anything to add, Justin?
No, that was a really good highlight of kind of like our journey, like we kind of talked about earlier. So let's just keep on going. And if anybody has questions in the chat or comments on anything, please feel free. Like I said, we were kind of hoping this would be more of an open forum than just us talking in depth by a slideshow. So if you have anything to add, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you. So again, like we said, where we started, it was always about convenience, and hopefully you guys can relate to that. I know most of you, or hopefully all of you, are in education, and I can understand how that's always the number one priority. A teacher's the day in the life of a teacher. I don't know if many people from IT get to go into a classroom and observe a teacher during the day, but their life is nonstop. I mean, the fact that I'm able to get up from my desk and go to the restroom when I need to is pretty amazing compared to a teacher who only has maybe like a 4-minute window, maybe like in the middle of the day. So I understand that it's not easy for them to pivot to the way they've been doing things and try to be more security conscious, but it's something where we have to just, put them in that pot of cold water and slowly turn it up and let them slowly get used to these new security policies. Again, at the start of COVID, like I mentioned, everything went on pause. We deployed 9,000 iPads out to pre-K through second. We swapped a bunch of Chromebooks, rolled out Zoom. That our district decided that was the best platform for CDL. Rolled out the relay filter from the Lightspeed systems onto the iOS devices that were going home, and really took a second look at our password management. All right, I'll pass the mic to Justin here. Oh wait, I forgot. Here's Boromir.
Gotta have the sweet meme. Yeah.
Yeah. So we threw out some polls, and there was an MFA poll, and right now we're rolling around 20% rolled out MFA to all staff, which is pretty impressive, even for the 7 people who did that. Like Boromir say, it's not something you roll out overnight. It's pretty difficult. We have a lot of roadblocks in our way, like how to deal with, getting people to use their personal devices for MFA, or do you do a hardware key or something with MFA? It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, finding a way to not interrupt the classroom at any point. I think moving to COVID really kind of like turned that MFA discussion off for us once that happened. So trying to find that balance between security and convenience, like we keep talking about.
All right.
So it looks like we're going to talk about admin rights a little bit. I'm not here to highlight a product specifically. This is more just things we gained by this product and the concept around just-in-time admin rights. So the product we used is Admin by Request. It's a good tool. If you want to go look at it, I think it's a worthy investment to an organization if you're still on this path of removing admin rights, because it gives you kind of like a bridge or a gap to going from full admin rights to nothing. So it's cool to see in, honestly, the poll chat that over half of our users or half of our attendees here have already kind of taken away admin rights. You're ahead of us, so that's awesome. Props to you guys. So just-in-time admin rights, I'm sure everybody knows, but just kind of that explanation, right? Like you're not a full admin at all times, but you have the ability to give yourself admin rights during a specific time period, or maybe to elevate an application that you're running, something along those lines. So that idea of like not permanent, but you still have that ability to do it. So with this tool or many other tools, right, we're getting that removal of permanent admin rights. Like Steven mentioned before, reducing that kind of like attack surface, right? Trying to make it so it's not as easily to kind of compromise that device. The other big thing that we found a huge benefit is the separation of like privileged accounts for admin related tasks on endpoints, right? So our technicians, they may have been a admin on a specific department group of devices. Well, now we can kind of take them out of that group and make it so really just the device itself has the ability to elevate that account that's on there. So that was another big gain. Less concern about now our tech's account getting compromised and maybe using that across 50 devices, not as big as a concern. So, and the other one, and this is more tool related, I don't know if all of the just-in-time tools kind of do this, but protection against critical system internals. So what's really nice about this tool is we can prevent users from modifying specific things right in the registry, using sudo commands on the Mac side, stuff like that. So one of the first questions we had is, well, how do you just don't elevate yourself and then go add yourself right to the local admins group, and then cool, no longer need the tool and everything's done. So this tool has some cool checks and balances against that to prevent that kind of idea around there. Another big thing we gained was actually real-time malware detection as well. So when users are elevating an application or going to run something, it's actually not checking against a cloud repository that admin by request uses for known bad software, things along those lines. So it's just like an extra check in that step that we weren't seeing before when a user was just a full admin. So if for some reason our EDR or right anti-malware software wasn't catching it, we at least had like another check and balance system there. So that was a huge gain for us. So advanced auditing, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more because I think this was the biggest gain. When we talked to our CIO, Steve Langford, and we're like, hey, we want to remove admin rights, I recall him telling a story. He's like, this is like the 4th or 5th time I've done this. Like we've either given them admin rights or we've taken them away, right? Like we keep going back and forth. So having the ability for us as client admins to kind of prepare for that next step and seeing all of the insights around what a user is doing on their device was beneficial, right? It's like an extra area for a software library. I kind of throw some examples in the slide, but getting ideas of like, what are they doing with admin rights? Like, are they elevating an application just because they don't really understand, but they think they need to run it as admin? Are they just, installing updates? Are they uninstalling something? Like, what is going on that they actually need admin rights to complete their job functions and their job duties? So that was like a huge insight that we gained with this application. And the last thing that we kind of talk about, for those that don't know, like in Beaverton, we have Windows devices, we have Mac devices. Staff, like teachers, are more on the Apple side of things, and like central office, like business departments, are more on Windows. So having a unified experience between the device platforms has always been like something Steven and I have looked for, because we're not trying to like compete. We're not trying to make it Ford versus Chevy. We're just trying to make it like, here's the device, regardless what you're comfortable or what you're using, we want it to be as uniform as possible. So those are the kind of thoughts and ideas we had around this.
Yeah, and it's a pretty affordable tool for the most part. It wasn't too expensive to get a couple thousand licenses. And Justin may have already said this, but this is a great transition tool as well. And that's what we're using it for, is using it to transition from full admin to limited admin to no admin eventually at some point. So hopefully we'll get to that point. All right. So here's Bilbo. This is maybe our user, with admin rights, and why shouldn't they install Adobe Flash on their computer that has MacKeeper installed in it? That's what they want, and why not? Why shouldn't I?
Why should I read that prompt, right? I'm in the middle of doing something. Just click yes. Just click.
Yeah, I'm on an Adobe Flash site and it's telling me to download Adobe Flash. Like, why shouldn't I do it? Like, who's going to stop me? I have admin rights.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, Bilbo.
Appreciate it. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit of what we've learned on this journey. Like Stephen mentioned earlier, like I feel like this was more luck than like our insight or intuition on timing. But we had rolled admin by request out like 2 months before COVID occurred, so it was perfectly timed for us and just out of luck. But we've learned a lot in the last year. About this idea of like permanent versus just-in-time admin rights. Like, is just-in-time admin rights the correct move to go, or should it be no admin rights? And I think we all know the answer is no, it should just be no admin rights. But we didn't, outside of insights from our personal experience, like we didn't gain much on the device side of things. And we talk about device hygiene here, right? Like users are still having this like unlimited experience of just installing whatever they want, whether it's at home or on our network. They have the ability to do it. Why not? So like circling back to that, like whose device is it, right? Is it the organization's device, or is it your personal device? Do you need to be doing your taxes on your personal device? Even though you can just do it in a web browser, but everybody still loves to just install, the TurboTax app and do it themselves. So just kind of highlighted and reinforced our ideas that no, they don't need that. Another thing Steve and I saw a lot was like our loss in deployment success when we're trying to like remediate devices or we're trying to deploy something new. There's all these new like caveats and like avenues we have to think about when we're like writing a script for something to install or trying to remediate something. Like there's all these things we have to think about because we don't really know like what the base state of the device is because we've lost control. It's your device now, you're doing whatever you want, but you want us to fix a few things when it doesn't go correctly, right? So like, how do we prevent that? And how do we keep that device clean at the same time? And how do we help, us as client admins do our job better? And another one that this was kind of like a yes and no is it seemed like, and this may be due to COVID, but it seemed like we actually had more users with admin rights now once admin by request kind of rolled out. And it was more word of mouth. Honestly, our staff has really loved the tool. So as it kind of like started to spread more, everyone was requesting it. And it was kind of the exact opposite of what we wanted when we took away admin rights in the first place and moved to this. So I guess depending on your tool and your environment, that may or may not be the case, but it kind of was for us. So what we kind of got a better understanding of from an end user perspective is, right, our users love to have like the latest up-to-date app, right? Like the day one it drops, man, like they want it updated. They want it ready to go. They want to use the newest features. Do they really know why? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they are a user that really pays attention to that, but it's kind of hard to tell. So like maintaining app update catalogs, right, and like deployments is really a full-time job. Like if we use the data we gathered from this tool, it is people want to be running the latest and the greatest. And I'm going to use one example that we kind of realized in our environment that kind of bit us in the butt a little bit was Zoom on the Mac side. Zoom deployed an update and it required an audio driver to be installed and it needed admin privileges, and it wreaked havoc in our environment just due to a change in the software practice. So us taking back control of like those types of app updates, determining when apps are vested or vetted and ready to be rolled out. I mean, that could have saved instruction time. It could have saved frustration. So it's just like all these little things that we start to gain knowledge on. And the other one I wanted to highlight on was bad business practice. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but why do you feel like you need to run this app as admin? Like, what are we gaining here? Is this just is that truly the app? And if so, we probably need to look at a different app because it's not built. It's not what we want in our environment. And if it's not, it's just a training issue, right? Like, how do we help you understand? Like, you don't have to do it this way. There's a different avenue. Yeah, you got to maybe jump over a hurdle or learn something new, but we got to kind of get there. So that was kind of the big one there that we gained. Out of curiosity from the audience out there, is there anybody? It seems like we had a decent amount of users saying, "Oh, wow, I totally missed the Q&A portion. My goodness."
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you want to take a quick break and answer a couple of those questions.
Yeah, I will stop rambling on there and let me read real quick here.
I just need to point out, though, I did push out the configuration to have the Macs not check for updates anymore for Zoom at some point. So that also reduced the, because, you know, when they get that prompt that says update Zoom, they're like, okay, let's make this happen. So that was turned off to allow vetting and me pushing out the updates that we vetted.
So Stephen, man, I am so terrible with names. McCandless? I hope I did not butcher that. He asked, our superintendent pushed for permanent admin rights. How do you overcome the controlling of the network aspect things? Yeah, that's a good question. I think it kind of goes back to being able to present the data of what you're providing them by not being admins on their device. Like, what are you giving back to your environment if you're not the admin, right? And how are you still giving them the capabilities of doing their jobs without them being an admin? So some things that come to mind for me right away is like software catalog or like self-service center, right? Like, you know what apps are needed in your environment or what configuration changes are needed. You can do that for them. Also, when you talk about the superintendent, they're probably like the one that's getting targeted the most in your environment. So really explaining that to them, like, I mean, the superintendent could be putting you in jeopardy by wanting that to a certain extent. And I understand they're in a leadership role, but you know, they need to understand that if anything, they need more awareness on training when it comes to security than probably our standard user does, just because they're not targeted as much. So. And then Brian, a local member of our Beaverton team who was an end user of admin by request. I totally agree with admin right removal. It's going to be the best path, but it will require that all the applications that users do need to be available, which means review, approve, deploy process. This takes a lot of time. How to do with frequent updates. Yeah, Brian. So that's like definitely what we're talking about.
Special case, I think, with them.
Yeah, kind of going back to Brian's a developer in our environment, so he does need admin rights to do specific things. So he has a good use case here. But definitely vetting applications goes back to one of my comments. It's a full-time job. Like paying attention to what apps are being updated, testing in obviously, right, some sort of testing group or environment you have, and then deploying. It's really a full-time job. There's some software catalogs out there that you can integrate with like Intune or SCCM. Nathan McNulty, a lot of you guys know, was a big fan of pushing for like Patch My PC, right? So you can utilize those third-party tools if you don't have the staffing to kind of go through that process. But yeah, it's been a lot of learning to kind of get us down or towards that goal, Brian. General cost for admin by request. That is a good question. It was.
And it gets cheaper with the amount of license, right, Justin?
Yeah, it was. I have the PO right here, actually. It was like $1.40 per license, and we had purchased 1,500 of them. Have you been talking to my district's end users? Totally. Definitely.
I could answer Max's question there about Zoom.
Yeah.
So I ended up pushing out Zoom has like an IT package with a specific URL. So there are a couple of scripts floating around, but essentially what the script does is it pulls down the IT version of the package, and then it gets, if you look at the installer, it actually recognizes it's not the consumer version downloaded from the web. It's like an IT specific version that allows for configuring. There's a plist in the library preferences file that has 2 values in it. And I'll see if I can post these to the chat. Oops, so there's the one plist for the, specifying the host, and it separated them out, but you could combine those two plists. And there's another one where it, the value is auto update false. I don't know if that pasted right. It doesn't look right. Copied it out of Xcode. I could probably, anyway, I'll send you the full plist, but the name of the plist is us.zoom.config.plist under library preferences. And there's just those values you could set. And there's a whole slew of values that you could put in there in order to restrict auto update and setting the host and other things like that.
Yeah, and I think our emails are available. So if you wanted to reach out for that, we could probably reply as well for anything around those lines. Scrolling down, what systems do you have MFA applied to? Yeah, so we use Azure Active Directory for like our SAML provider. So anything that really we're authing to, we have MFA enabled. Only for staff members though, and only for staff members that have opted into it. We do use trusted networks to not prompt for MFA on-prem. I don't know if I should share that or not, but it's too late, I guess. So we're going down the route where Stephen kind of talked about conditional access and like device compliance. Like, how can we tie that portion of it as well? So it's not just like a trusted network, but it's a trusted device. It's a healthy device. So like getting that carrot at the end of the road type scenario for our users. What are they gaining from us maintaining and keeping this device secure, right? We're not prompting them for MFA as often, or your password's not expiring in as short of amount of time. So that kind of idea. What techniques do you apply to get decision makers to swallow new things other than fear? I think the biggest thing that I've learned in our environment is like putting together a roadmap of how you're testing and how you're going to implement and like what everyone is gaining. In Steve and I's position, obviously we just have to present to our CIO and director, and then they take that to our leadership past that. So they're kind of a shield or a buffer for us in a sense. So they take the good and the bad out of what we've presented and probably filter it in a better way than we think about. But that's kind of the approach we've always taken. And just using, honestly, like examples of what's going on around us. Like ransomware right now, obviously it feels like it's very close to home. It seems like it's like next door type scenario since it's always happening. Would you describe the limits on admin versus no admin that you limited? I don't know if I understand the question. I'm just not thinking about this.
Describe the limits on admin versus no admin rights that we implemented.
Like who? Go for it, Steve.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I'm not really sure what limits are in place, or I don't know. Maybe you could, we'll have Todd maybe put that in the chat on what exactly he's wanting to know.
For sure.
Oh, I don't know. I could see if we can have Todd ask the question. Let me see if this works.
Oh, it does.
Oh, hello. Thanks for taking my call.
Are you there, Todd?
Long-time listener, first-time caller. So thanks, guys. Sorry if I typed that wrong. Basically, Everett is kind of getting to the same point, and we're looking to really pull the rug out completely and go to no admin. And so, well, as you guys were
Todd,
sort of,
if his mic starts working, he could ask the question.
Oh no, I can hear him. I can hear him.
Oh, I can't.
Oh, good. Okay, so Steve can just ignore me, and Justin can answer. As you went from all admin to no admin, I know you kind of discussed how you use that that just-in-time admin rights tool that you were referring to, admin by request. But like, what were some of those limitations you built in as you transitioned? What were some of the things you took away? Was it installing any third party or installing certain third party? Like, how did you make it feel like it was being limited?
Yeah, so honestly, we didn't limit it really much more than what they were already doing with full admin, outside of what I kind of highlight on just a little bit is it gave us the ability to have like it has allow and deny lists when it comes to like software paths, executables, whatever you can identify. You can restrict or allow things to run. You can even pre-approve applications actually, so there's no type of prompt for them when running an app that wasn't already approved, if that makes sense. But what we did was basically we could protect key things inside of the system internals. So I'm not the Mac guy, so Steven can talk a little bit more on that. But when we look at the Windows sign, right, like Windows side of things, like not running command prompt, regedit, just because you're admin, right? You can't still launch that. Any of the MMC, like any of those snap-ins that you can add into MMC, like removing the ability to adjust things that would, I guess in the end of the day would allow you to break the system or manipulate it in a way we don't want it. But when it came to a software kind of like installation path, it was still free reign because when we presented this tool to management, we presented it actually as like a year-long plan. We actually had planned on keeping this product for a year, but like I had mentioned before, that was before COVID. So the goal was to basically implement this at the end of the year, have it for an entire school year. Steven and I, towards the second half of that next school year, would start looking at, okay, here's what everyone's doing. Here's the apps that they're installing. Like, what avenues do we need to provide for users so we already have our self-service catalog built correctly? And like, what tools do we need to provide them to be able to understand like what they can no longer do when this admin rights are removed, and then like how they need to interact with us to make sure that we're providing those app updates, like Brian said, in a timely fashion, or like providing things ahead of time where it's not necessarily a request that's sitting there for a month in our help desk queue. Like, how are we being more proactive about it? So hopefully that answered or helped.
All right, I think we tackled most of the Q&A now, and I think we can grab the rest at the end. Do you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Justin?
Yeah, go for it. So antivirus and EDR, where are we at on time? Okay. So like you may notice from what Steve and I said is we really like this idea of like a mirrored experience for our users. We try to make everything the same. So like Steven mentioned, we rolled out Mfa Atp on our Mac clients right before COVID had occurred. So what kind of like, just to highlight what wasn't working without spending too much time in this, prior to that, we had ESET, and I believe we got that for like a year or two free after the SCCM one expired and all that fun stuff. But after that, it was like, what product do we want to use? And it just made sense. Like, why don't we just use MDATP? You have the same thing. Everybody has this kind of single pane glass view, right? Both device environments. We're not trying to like segment that information from one another because we're the admins over each device. We want to be able to help one another, right? So having that like unified experience. So if you want to go to the next slide, Stephen. So just to repeat myself, I guess a little bit, single pane of glass, right? Like we're working in the same system to monitor and respond to events that are happening within our organization. Another big game, I think, was training and delegation. So for us, we have a couple of like junior sysadmins. Sysadmin ones is what we call them, or is their job title, I should say. And it gives us the ability to train them on one platform. So they don't need to understand something for Mac and understand something for Windows. The core concept between them is similar, and they have one place they're looking for it. So like I said, uniformity, policy configurations, restrictions. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one uniformity, but it's at least step in the right direction. Other big thing, right, with the EDR is like you'll notice with these, we kind of have like an overlapping of software libraries, right? We have like our MDMs with software libraries. We have admin by request that's providing information on a software library on our devices. And we have like an EDR that's also kind of providing that information as well. So like another area to get insight is like, okay, what vulnerabilities do our operating systems have? What vulnerabilities do our applications have? Like, we have 20 different versions of Chrome on devices right now. Like, we need to target that and get that cleaned up. We have that, with pick your application and it's in our environment. There's a bunch of different versions of it. And that all ties back to the majority of it, of the admin rights, right? Like, for the users that aren't admins on their machines, everything's uniform. But the ones that are admins, it's not necessarily a uniform experience. So kind of getting through that. And then device compliance. So I will say, like, with device compliance, we're on the route, we're on the path to that, but we're not there yet. So like on the Windows side, I will say it's a little easier because on Mac, it requires more end user interaction to get this device compliance working, at least from the information that Steve and I have found. So trying to get to this like understanding that we want to have devices in a specific, sorry, someone's blowing me up there. Let me quit real quick. We want to have devices on a specific configuration to allow them to access stuff in our organization. And they can be something super simple, like we're no longer supporting this OS. So like upgrade, or if it's failing to upgrade, you need to talk with your local tech so we can get that fixed and we can get there. So that kind of idea there. Who want to?
I think
you can go ahead.
And another piece with the Mac side, I mean, Microsoft Defender on what testing with M1 and Big Sur have run into a lot of challenges with kernel extensions. Hopefully, they're going to be moving more to system extensions, and also the prompt for filtering network traffic, trying to overcome those challenges as well to make the installation of Defender smoother on these M1 Macs. We're refreshing all of our teacher laptops this summer, like Justin mentioned. So being able to get that tool installed this summer on the M1 Macs without these, constant prompts and all these interactions. So we're still trying to put that security piece there and taking away, making it as convenient as possible without them having to do everything. But it's still a challenge that we're still trying to.
Yeah. So this is going to highlight like, I think the question around like superintendent and getting buy-in and stuff like that. But there's still a lot we're learning with this, and even though we've had it implemented for over a year, like obviously there's still hurdles and challenges that like we're trying to overcome. And like I'm gonna use Brian actually in the chat as an example because he's someone that feels this every now and then. Is like how do we implement these policy changes without breaking business workflow specifically, right? So like we talked about attack surface reduction, but like how do we find that balance? We can audit, we can warn the user, we can block it, but we need to find a good mix between blocking it, allowing that workflow to happen, but also not bypassing with allow lists. I think that should always be like the last option when we're looking at these things. Like, is there any other way we can do this job function that doesn't increase the amount of time or decrease your output in your role and not add it to this just allow list? Because I think what happens with the allow list idea, it's like once you go down that path, you never stop. Well, you did it for this, let's do it for this. Let's do it for this, let's do it for this. So it's just kind of nonstop there. Another big thing that we didn't put in this presentation, but something we've kind of talked about a lot is classroom software. Like having to deal, we have a app review process now for student data privacy and the application itself and a committee within our organization. So like we're getting all these insights on apps that teachers are using or requesting us to package or they're installing themselves, and trying to find that balance between like how do you sunset that application and tell them like they have to get to the newest version, because a lot of the policies we're implementing break the application. I'm going to use the example on the Windows side of unsigned apps, unsigned executables. I have a CTE teacher that like loves this specific version of Python, I believe it is, and it's not signed, but that's her knowledge is around it and her curriculum is built around it. So if we say no, she can't use it. So it's like, how do we find that balance without impeding or impacting the classroom and still getting away with security, right? Security and convenience. We can say it over and over again. And then changing IT practice. Honestly, I think that's been one of the hard ones. Internally within our IT department, it's hard to get people to change what they've been doing for 10, 20, 30 years, like including myself. Like how do you get your coworkers to buy into this? Because at the end of the day, when you take away that convenience, you are increasing the time it takes for their like productivity output, right? So like, how do we get them on board with that security idea and make them happy with it? It's easy if you just want your administration to say, well, this is what you're doing, so deal with it. But you don't want that kind of like relationship in your environment. So trying to find that balance of how to do that. And like I said, sunsetting practices. I know I kind of bounced around quite a bit. So yeah.
Internet filtering. This is fun stuff.
Internet filtering, yeah. So what's cool is it seems like we're way behind on internet filtering. Oh no, it went back 50-50. Just kidding. So I think this one highlights that idea of like personal, whose device is it, personal or the organization's. But like for us right now, we don't filter devices once they're off our network. So on-prem, we do filtering through our Palo Alto, but off-prem, students are filtered by Lightspeed. But staff members were not doing anything. So like, how do we get to that point? Like we kind of said before, of uniformity as well. A big thing Steven and I see problems with is like staff reportings and records requests. Like how, if it didn't happen on our network, it happened at home on the device, we're basically banking on them like not clearing their browsing history and deleting that cache and all that stuff. Like, how do we provide that information for our administration when they need something like that? So I think staff reporting is a huge one that we're kind of losing out on, because when those requests come through, I hate to say I can't provide that information for you because I don't have it. And then staff experience, back to uniformity, is like we have staff members put together all this curriculum plan, right, on their Windows or Apple device. But they forget that a student Chromebook is filtered in a completely different way. So there's been a bunch of times where, a student goes to do something that a teacher put together from a curriculum standpoint, and they don't have access to specific things, or embedded videos are blocked and stuff like that. So trying to provide a better way where staff will have an understanding too of like what a student will have access to. And obviously our staff and student policies are going to be different. They're not going to be one-to-one, but hopefully it gets us closer to that path of uniformity and kind of that mirrored experience. And then the last one, which is really the reason it seems like it scares people, is like reminding staff we aren't sitting there watching their every move. Like just because we're filtering your device at home doesn't mean someone's sitting here 24/7 trying to monitor what you're doing. Now, I still don't recommend doing anything you shouldn't be doing, on your obviously on your work device, but kind of getting that idea out there, like it is a district device, it's a corporate device, right? So we need to be taking control of that, and we need to be filtering that, even if it's not on our network. And if no one's forcing you to use it at home as a personal device, so you can go out and buy a personal device if you really feel the need to do things that maybe our filter or our device restrictions aren't allowing you to do anymore.
All right, thanks, Justin. So on that roadmap we saw at the beginning, this is in the where we want to be category now. Getting to one of the things that I think everyone could agree with, and the questions we saw, is getting the organization to buy into this concept of sharing the responsibility with the end user. That's not going to be easy. I think we're all going to have challenges with that, and some districts are smaller than others. Some districts are huge, where you have lots of departments. You have to get them to sign off on this kind of stuff, and it's not going to be easy. And one thing we need to figure out is how we're going to actually get get the word out, and actually, have them understand the need for this change. And like the question said, I mean, it shouldn't be fear-based. It should be based on the idea that this is better for them, this is better for the organization. Getting them all to, just coming to a consensus that, these additional restrictions or filters or it's all for the better good of the whole organization. Like Justin said, like if they can't get someplace while they're at home on their work machine, maybe they can get a personal one to do it. And understanding that we put those restrictions on that work computer for a reason. And like we talked to before about empowering the user, we want them to understand that these filters, these password practices, these additional the scrutiny that they put on emails that they receive in their work email account, they could apply those to their personal email account. Looking for signs of phishing and just being aware of what they're doing when they're looking at their email. And I know we're going to get to the point where we can, get admin rights removed and device compliance, and these new laptops that we got rolling out for the teachers this summer. We're going to just implement all these new security changes on them, and this is always a great opportunity to make these major changes on a new device. Instead of taking something away from their old device, they're just starting off with a clean slate. There was another comment in there about the same thing where the new devices have no admin rights, and that's the direction we're headed on these. Is right off the bat, no admin rights, and the older devices will eventually, fade away into the sunset. And then finally, we don't ever want to say no to our end users. We want to let them know that they have the power to do a lot of things, and it takes a lot of work on our part to get to that point. If a user's traveling or user's at home and they've got to the point where the system's just not capable of doing something, or we've done all the troubleshooting to death and we can't get it to work, giving them the option to reset their machine, to actually bring it back to factory defaults on our Windows and Mac devices. With M1 Macs and Big Sur and even Windows 10, it's possible to let them just wipe their device, go through the setup process, and bring it back to a known working state. Having a file syncing tool on there like OneDrive or Google Backup and Sync or Google File Stream, letting them get their files off, and then when they log back in, the app pulls back down and all their files start syncing again. Giving them the power to do these things that normally a technician would need to take their computer for several days, and they can just push a button and do it at their convenience. Justin, I don't know, do you want to talk about the rest of these points, or should we jump to Q&A?
Yeah, we can jump to Q&A. I was just going to highlight, I think Steve and I's nerdy dream is getting the user excited about being able to reset their device at home and stuff like that. Do they
get excited about doing that?
Yeah, I think some of our users actually really do like that idea, and something we're posing as kind of a pilot this summer of, instead of just having our techs image 3,000 devices, right? All of our staff devices coming in. How can we kind of do a pilot model of come in, here's your device, you unbox it, you turn it on, it takes you through this setup process, and that's it. You can do it at home, you can do it at Starbucks, you can do it outside the country, well, depending on geo exclusion policies, but you can do what you want with that device where you want, and you don't need a tech. So that idea of oh no, especially with COVID, right? Oh, I have to schedule a time to bring my device into the district and meet with a tech so they can re-image it, and they need to give me a loaner, then I got to do this whole process. How can we just be oh yeah, click this button, or we can click it for you actually remotely, and be it's reverting to that original state, and you can do that anywhere. So trying to get excitement around that of they don't need us as much, which I guess is good and a bad thing, but we kind of want them to have that ability to do that. So, and then the last thing we were going to highlight, yeah, challenges. That's right. So I think it's obviously been highlighted in the chat, but org buy-in, right? How do you get your management and other departments on board? They're they're most likely going to see the negatives right away, the things you're taking away. So choosing your battles wisely, and I think timing is very important. Like Stephen mentioned, clean slate, because it's a brand new device. So on that device from the very beginning, they're used to these practices because they didn't have it on there before. And just helping them understand the benefits, taking that leap of faith is always probably the hardest one. Even the idea, I'll tell you right now, that Steve and I are talking about changing our deployment workflow, of just kind of giving that that opt-in ability for staff to pick it up and do it themselves is a leap of faith from our management team. Like them understanding what we've put together, and we'll still have the resources available to support that user if things go wrong with that when they take that leap. So, and then
it's like outsourcing some of our IT work to the end user, not holding their hand the whole time.
Yeah. And then training and maintaining, I think this is something we're all really good at because we all have, it's not like you just set up one system in your career and that's the end of it, right? Like it's constantly evolving, constantly changing. So like, how do you set up your system and help people around you, help them learn it so they can help you support it? Because none of these systems we talked about today are honestly just set up and never look back. I mean, it's set up and reviewing honestly monthly, if not more frequently than that. Just sometimes we don't have that much time. So finding that balance between training and maintaining. And I think we can go to Q&A unless you had anything else to add there, Stephen.
No, it's over, guys. So I think we'll just jump back into Q&A. I think our end time is in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So we could jump through some of these.
Are you guys using personal devices with Authenticator app for MFA? We are, and it's an opt-in process. Outside of the IT department, I should say, it's an opt-in process. So that's honestly one of our biggest hurdles from a policy perspective is those users that are like, I don't want to use a personal device to do this. So there's a lot of good arguments there. One of the ones we talk about a bunch is like, well, then you don't need to use your phone to access district email off of our network, right? Like you added our email on your personal device, so you can't add that extra layer of protection. But obviously that's a tough talking point because we can't be in the position of telling people too bad, so sad at the same time. So trying to find that balance there has been hard for us. And then how do you communicate and deploy large OS updates on non-admin devices when devices are home and devices may or not be plugged in?
Yeah, I could tackle this one, at least from a Mac perspective. This happened to us over COVID, during the pandemic. Is basically I leveraged Jamp to create a group based on devices that didn't have the OS we wanted, and at the time was Catalina. So 10.15 was pre-cached on their systems. I also had to create a group and determine if there were machines that didn't have sufficient disk space. The current teacher laptops have a very limited SSD, so a lot of them didn't have even enough disk space. So we had to send them a prompt that let them know that their hard drive was too full. They needed to clear up some files in order to get an update to complete. For the other users, we pre-cached that Catalina installer, and then there's a script that I kicked off that started the install process with a warning. The script also checks and makes sure that the power is connected before it starts. If not, it prompts the user to plug it in, and then as soon as they plug it in, it continues the process. But we gave emails to the teachers letting them know that when your device is at home, you may get this prompt. And if you see it, just let your device stay with the lid open and to complete the process. And we had a pretty good success rate. There was still, 20 or 30% of devices that, just never completed for whatever reason. Either they never plugged it into power or something went wrong with caching the update. And, luckily for us, we're moving to a new system, but it's hard to tackle those major OS upgrades remotely. The best you could do is kind of cast a wide net and hope you get as many as possible. It's too bad Jamp doesn't have a built-in, or I don't know of any MDM provider that has a built-in mechanism for that. Unless you're running an M1 Mac with a Big Sur, or I think just starting in Big Sur, you can actually push out a command to do updates. But I don't know if those do major OS upgrades or just the minor ones.
Yeah, and just to comment on the Windows side, we're co-management right now, so we're not fully integrated into Intune, but that's coming with new staff devices as we're going to just be doing Intune only. So when it comes to like that idea, from a reimage perspective, they had to be on our network, but from OS upgrades and whatnot, feature updates, Windows update policies, stuff like that, setting those deadlines makes it, I think, a little easier on the Windows side with some things.
Hung from Tiger Chwalaton asked if we use a hardware key if users don't want to use the app on a personal device. I know that's something we discussed as a possibility. They're a little bit pricey. I know there's a whole bunch of different brands to use, but I think that's something we're going to explore before we fully implement MFA.
Yeah, Nathan, before he left Beaverton, he was testing that. I think the hard thing is just managing them, coming up with a good way to manage that rollout, and then cost. I mean, it does cost a decent chunk of money to buy all those. So, and
right.
We did not evaluate Malwarebytes Nebula. I don't have really any knowledge specifically about that product, so I can't talk about my thoughts between the two. I don't know if Steven does. No.
No, I mean I've never used it in enterprise fashion.
Yeah, me neither. And then VPN anytime devices are not on the own network. I love the idea of always on VPN, Brian. I know we've talked about that a lot, trying to go down that route, because I think also it provides a lot of extra security for us. So I know it's something we've talked about, slightly out of our wheelhouse when it comes to forcing that change, but it's something we are always discussing. Are there safe solutions for Windows applications, for CTE programs, etc., for student use on Chromebook and iPads? In terms of application consistency, yeah, that's a good question, David. I don't necessarily know the answer to that. I'm sure there are applications that are similar. It seems to be like Mac OS and Windows is always the core kind of operating system for CTE, but obviously it's going that route of iPads and Chromebooks. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that one, Steven.
No, I mean that's pretty much it. Jesse asked about what are we using for remote into user machines, and right now we rolled out TeamViewer for both our platforms. It's been working pretty well. We have a custom installer that runs a script that has a command line where you can basically dump it into a specific TeamViewer group, and there's an API key you put in there as well to have it join up with our enterprise instance of TeamViewer, and it works really well. Where we just, when the end user calls in, we ask for the machine name, and that's the variable we added in the script. We plug in the machine name, and we can request to view their screen. What's great about that is it doesn't allow our technicians to connect without an end user there, so there's no chance of them being on a system unattended. And it's able to, we can do file transfers with TeamViewer and lots of other cool stuff with that.
Yeah. I'll jump up real quick to Jesse's questions because he had a few. We do use SCCM. We're co-managed with Intune right now. Almost all my time that I'm spending with Windows management, I'm trying to spend in Intune because I'm trying to get us fully Intune integrated and just get to that modern endpoint management and try and get away from SCCM as much as possible. We use Laps in the Windows environment, and I actually just set up Slaps. I find that hilarious. Serverless local admin password. So we have that. I have that set up in Intune. It's not obviously something from Microsoft, and it's not doesn't have all the same features. Biggest one being rolling the password necessarily. So that's probably the two big problems with it. And then Steven said TeamViewer, hardware key. Can we make the
Justin,
PowerPoint available?
If you want to filter it by unanswered questions, I've been marking the ones as answered.
Thank you, Steven. How many Windows and Apple devices? We have roughly 2,000, just over 2,000 Windows devices. I don't know where we're at on Apple.
About 10,200 Macs and 22,000 iPads, iPads and Apple TVs and other mobile devices.
Right on. Yeah, we can make the PowerPoint available. That's not a problem.
I don't know if we could share the link outside our organization, so I don't know, Justin, if you...
Yeah, we can make it public.
Okay, if you want to do that.
Yeah, no problem at all. I think we answered Brian's personal devices. I think that's everything.
Did we answer the question about personal devices with MFA? David?
Yeah. I think we did, at least. That was the idea of, yeah, you got to use your personal phone to enroll with MFA as at least one of the authentication methods, which is a hurdle. Chad, oh, that's for you, Stephen. My answer is I hope not, but I'm gonna let Stephen answer.
Temporary elevate to admin. Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing right now with admin by request. It allows our end users to, from the end user side with the admin by request tool, they get a little item up in their menu bar or in their dock, and when they click it, they put in a reason why they're requesting admin rights, and then a little timer pops up. You could set it for whatever length of time, but by default, I think it's 15 minutes. And during that 15-minute window, they have the ability to install software. They, like Justin said before, they don't have the ability to go into system preferences and make themselves an admin or edit any of the other system preference panes that have a lock in it. They can't use the sudo command in terminal. It really restricts it to just really software installations during that 15-minute window. And they could request that 15-minute window as often as they want, but it ensures that their user account is not permanently an admin all the time. So they only get it during that window to do their installation. They can end it. Eventually, we're going to move away from that, but there are plenty of other scripted solutions that use launch agents to elevate their rights, and then it kind of watches it for a while and then turns it back off, that type of stuff that are free solutions. But that would give them full admin rights, and then you have to deal with the possibility of them making themselves permanent admins during that window, which I know most of our users probably wouldn't do, but there's the possibility they could.
Yeah, we use just-in-time admin. Yeah, we're still using it right now. COVID kind of closed our window of, it was originally meant to be only a year, but now it's going to be kind of more like a year and a half. So we're still using it right now, but it's getting removed starting this upcoming school year. And then to David's point, that is like the exact reason why we got shut down on MFA is because of union issues.
Yeah, David's question was, how much pushback have we had using personal devices? Any union issues? And yeah, we have.
Yeah, and that conversation about the union is kind of out of Stephen and I's realm. Our management team is really good at keeping us informed on all that stuff, but that was one of the biggest hurdles why it got shut down. That plus COVID just pretty much killed it right away. It was just unfortunate timing. How are you making the security education you are providing engaging and not another thing that staff end up ignoring? Yeah, that's something we're trying to honestly get better at. I think currently our security education is actually lacking. So we're trying to get, for end users, I should say. So we're trying to get better at trying to find a way to do that. I will say, when we had this whole like phishing campaign within our district of getting users to submit like what they think is phishing emails and helping them learn, we kind of did it in a cool way where it was like posters around a school and like these cool graphic arts, and that seems to caught on really well. So trying to find another way to like implement that with other security changes.
I was going to say our system support team is working with teaching and learning, and they're putting together these short little videos. The intent of those is really just how to use your device, like how to use a trackpad, a touch bar, some simple things like that. But we're very easily can implement some security videos, and as long as you're short and condensed and easy to watch, I think they'll be effective alongside a kind of campaign like Justin mentioned.
Yeah. I think I answered this one earlier. For what systems do you have MFA applied to? Google. Basically, any application we have integrated with Azure Active Directory, we have MFA enabled for, assuming the user has actually enrolled in an optional MFA group we have associated to that conditional access policy. So
it was about a year ago we got rid of I'm sorry, I'm about to say APFS, which is the format. I was going to say ADFS. And move towards a central, SAML provider type thing.
Then what techniques do you apply to get decision makers to swallow new things other than fear? I don't remember if we answered this already or not, but like just as much information as possible, honestly, like showing that we've put together an insight of how it's going to affect the user, what they're going to gain, what our timeline looks at, how we've tested it, training material ready for them. So when we in our communication approach, right? Like we're going to communicate this 6 weeks, 4 weeks, and 2 weeks out with our normal staff communication methods, and then we're going to implement the change after that. And each one of those communication methods, we've also provided, the documentation and training around what's going to change, what are you going to see, how do you respond, that whole thing. So I guess your question is more around decision makers. And for us, I think our IT management team does a really good job of taking like what we feel is a gain and kind of filtering that to a cabinet level. So they only hear, not that they only hear the positives, but they cut out kind of the parts that necessarily don't care about, to make sure that those changes get kind of taken in. So then central SAML provider, we use Azure Active Directory as our SAML provider.
Thanks, everyone. Just looking through the chat here, I don't see any other questions in there. So I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if we'll have another place where we could post the link to the presentation later, but there might be a way to do that. I appreciate everyone's time and coming and having a discussion with us. I know we're all going to struggle to get through all these security changes. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.